It's my privilege to welcome you to the President's Breakfast Convocation. Our featured guest this morning is President Vicente Fox, be introduced here in a moment by Dr. Mary Doctor. It's been a privilege of mine to serve this year with Dr. Rick Pointer, our acting provost, and Rick will come and tell you what will happen throughout this hour and introduce our guests. Rick?
Thank you so much, President Beebe. Well, this is an honor indeed this morning to welcome so many of you from not only our campus community, but Santa Barbara and the greater Los Angeles area. We have a very special guest with us this morning. In a moment, our moderator for the morning, Dr. Mary Doctor from our Modern Languages Department, will introduce our guest. Let me say just a quick word about Dr. Doctor herself. She came to Westmont in 1992 to join our Modern Languages Department, and she teaches Spanish and Hispanic language and literature. She is herself a graduate of UCLA, both as an undergraduate and then did her MA and PhD work there at UCLA. One of the reasons we invited Mary to be the moderator this morning is because of her rich and vast experience, not only teaching about Mexico and its wonderful language and literature, but her own personal experience in living, studying, and working there as an undergraduate, as a postgraduate elementary school teacher, then in graduate school doing research there, and also as a Westmont faculty person leading our own Westmont in Mexico program there on 2 occasions and being the co-designer of that program. So there's no one really from our own community who's more equipped to understand and help us understand and moderate a discussion this morning of the important relationship between our own nation and our neighbor to the south, and Dr. Doctor. So please join me in welcoming her this morning.
Thank you. Buenos días. Buenos. Fantástico. Es excelente. Bienvenidos a todos. It is truly an honor to introduce you to President Vicente Fox. In the year 2000, all eyes were on Mexico, as Vicente Fox, a political outsider of sorts, accomplished a feat many considered impossible. He won the presidency of Mexico and in the process shattered 71 years of one-party rule in that country. Campaigning to change a crippled, corrupt system, his victory ushered in a new era of hope in Mexican politics. In his book, Revolution of Hope, he chronicles the life, faith, and dreams of a Mexican president. The grandson of a German-American immigrant, he is living proof that not all those who leave home to seek the American dream travel north. And as the son and grandson of restless pioneers, he himself is always on the move. In the book, he notes that in Mexico, people say, God has nothing but time, yet Fox is always in a hurry. He certainly moved fast. When working as a truck driver for Coca-Cola, he sped up through the organization to become the youngest CEO in the history of Coca-Cola Mexico. Then a few years later, while still in his 30s, he was offered the presidency of the entire Latin American corporation division. But he declined the position, opting instead to return home to his roots, to the ranch he grew up on in Guanajuato, to help out in the family businesses. Now, don't misunderstand. He remained in a hurry, but not for moving up the corporate ladder. You see, despite his attire today, he's never really been much of a coat and tie kind of guy. Not much for sitting behind a big desk. He is instead a man of action, of deep faith and convictions, a man for others. The Jesuits had taught him that it wasn't enough to build up one's own life projects. The real goal was to improve the lives of those less fortunate. This eventually led him into a life of public service in local, state, and national politics, where, Among other things, he initiated education reform, signed Mexico's first Freedom of Information Act, established microlending banks to help move people out of poverty, and fought for more progressive immigration policies with the United States. Since leaving office in 2006, the former president has returned to the ranch his grandfather established, but he has not slowed down. In fact, that ranch is now home to Mexico's first presidential library, as well as the Centro Fox academic think tank for global democracy, where he has generously invited some Westmont students to come visit and work. And the anti-poverty foundation, Vamos Mexico, which he founded with his wife, Marta Sahagún. Always on the move, always in a hurry, he and his wife continue to work to bring hope and change not only to Mexico, but throughout the Americas. A progressive thinker and activist, outspoken on issues of globalism, free trade, and immigration, sometimes controversial, always provocative, President Vicente Fox continues to fight for his American dream, an America of bridges, not walls, where people are lifted out of poverty and into the bright light of promise. President Fox, we are so honored that you chose to slow down for just a moment to share your morning with us, and we look forward to learning from you. Now, please join me in extending a warm Westmont welcome to President Vicente Fox. And now we will begin our program. This is a conversation about things that matter. We've asked 4 students who represent a variety of disciplines and interests to read President Fox's book and to engage in a dialogue with this important world leader. How fortunate we are to be able to listen to that conversation. At this point, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and with no further ado, we'll begin. John.
My name is John Evancoe. I'm a senior. I am a double major with economics and business and mathematics. In the fall, I plan on attending grad school to pursue a PhD in economics with an emphasis in international trade and macroeconomics. And on campus here, I'm a member of the cross-country and track and field team.
Good morning. My name is Hannah Cochran. I'm a junior here at Westmont, and I'm studying political science with a minor in mathematics. I also play flute in the Westmont Orchestra. Upon graduation, I will have had the opportunity to study abroad twice. Last year, I was able to attend Europe semester, and this next fall, I will be taking classes and interning in Washington, D.C.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome again, President Fox. We're really so excited to have you. My name is Andrea Owen. I'm also a senior. Here at Westmont, I have studied Spanish and also have been pre-med. I had the opportunity to study abroad in Sevilla, Spain, and it was a wonderful experience. In the fall, I will be starting medical school in the fall of 2011.
Buenos días, Presidente Fox. My name is Manuel Hernandez Sanchez Jr., but my friends call me Chach. I am a senior, and I am studying sociology. I'm also a member of the track and field team with John, and both my parents immigrated from Mexico, and I'm very proud of my Mexican heritage. As for after graduation, I plan on attending grad school and receiving my master's in film and documentary. Thank you.
Along the lines of what you were talking about this morning at the President's Breakfast and how the North American economies are so interconnected, with particular and how Mexico's economy is so dependent on exports, and in particular the health of other countries' economic health, do you view this as a good thing, and where do you see the future of the Mexican economy going?
Buenos dias, good morning, everybody. Thank you for your invitation to be here, investing this time together with you on this dialogue. And we hope this dialogue will take us to enhance bridge building between Mexico and United States. John, we've been neighbors throughout history, Mexico and United States. We have had ups and downs in that history. We have had wars among ourselves. We have lost a great part of our territory in Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California. Used to be Mexico. We did not make a very good deal on that negotiation. For a few dollars, we lost that part of the territory. But we've been smarter lately. By being neighbors, we have become friends. By being neighbors and friends, we have become partners. And this is why such a strong dependence on our economies. We trade more than any other bloc in the world between Mexico, United States, and Canada. We conform the largest trading bloc worldwide. And together we're the largest consumer market in the world. Mexico imports products from United States worth over $250 billion US dollars. To have an idea, this is more trading, or this is a larger trading balance than the one United States has with Italy, France, Germany, and Britain together. This gives us an idea of the solid, strong partnership that we have. 85% of foreign investment in Mexico comes from United States. And it's a natural, this intense trading. But also we have an intense trading and exchange of human resources. In that border we share, over 1 million persons cross every day. And we have here in the States a Mexican origin population close to 25 million people, 5 generations that are here. But don't be surprised, there is also over 100,000 US citizens working in Mexico. So it's an enriching exchange in human capital, enriching exchange and trade on products and services, and an enriching exchange on building a future together.
President Fox, the subtitle of your book is The Life, Faith, and Dreams of a Mexican President. In the book, you describe how your faith and your Jesuit education has really transformed the way that you've approached politics. In particular, you talk about what it means to be a man for others. My question for you is, based on your experience, how does faith transform politics?
Well, I hope it would do much more, because my experience in politics is much disappointing in what I found of contents in politics that has to do about ethics, moral values, universal values. I think there's a vacuum, empty space that has to be fulfilled in politics. If we take Mexico, for instance, politicians don't speak about God. They would never say, I request the help of God, or I need God to help me guide my future steps. They don't use compassionate words. We are too machos for using the word love. And all of this is something that will bring to politics its real dynamism and the real impact that is needed to have great nations with great economies, to have societies that have equal opportunities of growth and development, to eradicate poverty, disease, which we have not been able to do in Latin America. But much of it would have to do with the content of values and ethics on the daily exercise of politics.
In your book and this morning at the President's Breakfast, you've talked quite a lot about immigration from Mexico to the United States, and you connect it with the American dream. You say, the day America loses its ability to tolerate this diversity, the day our hemisphere fails to foster this immigrant hunger for success, this is the day we say goodbye to the American dream. Could you explain your vision of how the free movement of peoples throughout the Americas, from Chile to Canada, would help realize the American dream for all of us?
Well, maybe we have to go back all the way to the times of Adam and Eve. After they married and they ate the apple, then they decided to move. They decided to migrate and started populating the whole of the world. Human beings have that very strong characteristic of movement, of dreams, of challenges, meeting challenges. And this is the energy that all migrants have. Look at those that received me right there on the door. That people I admire. They work here in this college. They work all over the United States. So migration is an asset. It's a very strong asset. And these people are my heroes. I mean, they have such a courage, they have such a hunger and desire to accomplish things that they leave their homes, that they cross deserts and mountains, like my grandfather did, coming from Cincinnati, Ohio, back in 1890, all the way down to Guanajuato, Mexico. He was searching, he was on the move, he was looking for his American dream, and he found it there in Guanajuato. He came with no penny in his pocket. He was the assistant to the butcher of the town of Cincinnati, Ohio. He will be in charge of sacrificing the hogs. And later he didn't like that job so much, so he took a horse. He said goodbye to his mom with tears in her eyes, and he started the road. By horse, crossing mountains, deserts, borders, he got there. And that's the story, the individual, heroic story of migrants. And that's why they have such a power within. And they change things. And they change the reality.
Presidente Fox, in light of your vision for a different immigration policy, how would your policy benefit and provide hope for the person who still must leave their family in Mexico behind to work multiple jobs under harsh conditions in the U.S. in order to provide a better future for him or herself and their family?
Well, I would summarize a position that we, President Bush and myself, as you call him here, Bush 43, we committed to an immigration reform when he came down to Rancho San Cristobal at the beginning of his term and the beginning of mine. We spent there 2 days discussing the issue, and we decided that that would be our key priority in both of our administrations. He was convinced, and I was convinced. But many times, facts and events come to change things. And then came September the 11th. 4 days in advance, September the 11th, I was in Washington addressing both chambers of Congress jointly, and everything was optimism. The economy was growing, there was a huge demand for labor and work, new jobs being created, and the market was allocating that human resource. But after that very sad date, that should never ever repeat again, priorities changed, absolutely changed. And from there on, I started listening my friend, President Bush, saying, Vicente, not now. I don't think I can get that reform out of Congress these days. And I said, why? He said, because priorities have changed. Okay, fine. So we had to wait. A year later, Vicente, this has to be done tomorrow, mañana, because we're going into an election. And in an election, I cannot get out of Congress that reform. And so it was mañana, mañana, and I thought that word was only used by Mexicans. You know, my main slogan campaigning was today, today, today. You have to make things happen today. But what is the reform that was presented? Well, we discussed it between both administrations. Then for a week's time, we had the honor of receiving also in Mexico Senator Kennedy and Senator McCain, and we discussed what would be the best reform to be presented to Congress. And then it was presented, and it has three contents. One is what has to be done with the 12 million undocumented migrants that are working here in the United States. They do have a job. Institutions, corporations, families, and individuals are hiring these people, and they are making an enormous contribution to U.S. economy through their quality, through their productivity, through their loyalty. So the decision was to document these people, not to give them the nationality. They are not even requesting to become U.S. citizens. They just want the opportunity to work. So it was to document them on their work so that it would be legal, so that their human rights would be respected, so that their labor rights would be respected. Number one. Number two issue was how are we going to meet the future needs of labor for this U.S. economy? Because when U.S. economy runs at the rate of 2 to 3% economic growth a year, then you need 500,000 additional workers to meet the needs of the economy. So there came the idea, and it's the proposal, a temporary guest program, so that every year 500,000 workers, people coming from different nations of the world, would have the opportunity to work here and fulfill that need. But that would be variable and flexible. It could go up and down according to market needs. If one specific year 350,000 would be needed, those would be called and invited to come, like we do in Canada. That's the way Canada manages that flow of energy and that flow of working force. If 1 year the request is for 600,000, then 600,000 would come. They would stay here only until the time where they have that job. The day they don't have that job anymore, then they have to go back. And the third issue there, the third content, has to do with the families. It's criminal to divide families because of this issue of the border, or this issue of migration. Back there, in 1 out of 2 homes in rural areas, that home is led by the women, by the wife. And she has to take care of all of the kids. She has to raise the money and work to be able to feed their kids. Pretty difficult for that family having those kids to go to school. So breaking families, it has a very strong impact on quality of life. And it also has a very strong moral and ethical impact. Because some of these guys, some of these machos, and I call them that, come here and then they find the girl and they marry again. Fortunately, not all of them, a few of them. So this is a critical part of the reform. And the reform proposes that all those temporary guest workers, or all those who are now documented on their job, would have the right to bring their families, would have the right to go back and forth to see their kids back in Mexico, so that that family doesn't break. I think that's the humane part of the reform, which is great, and it really brings in contents of compassion and love to a reform.
President Fox, you touched on this in the breakfast this morning, but in your opinion, what are the effects of the drug cartels and their effects on Mexico and the surrounding countries, and in particular, the effects on the economy and the underground economy, and where do you see the struggle going in the future?
Well, the impact is dramatic. The impact of drug consumption, of drug trafficking, of crime, violence, cartels is dramatic on the economy, is dramatic on the values of Mexico, is dramatic on society, is dramatic in the community. So we're working hard trying to solve that problem, which, by the way, is not Mexico's problem. It's United States' problem, because the drug is consumed in this nation. And Mexico just happens to be in between the largest drug consumer market in the world, which is this nation, and the drug-producing nations of the South, the Colombias, the Venezuelas, Ecuador, Bolivia, and Mexico's paying the price. We're having 40, 50 people killed every day. Mexico has transformed itself from a transit nation to drugs coming from the south to the north, to a drug-producing nation, which causes a lot of problems, and finally, and unfortunately, and sadly, today, the market, the consumer market in Mexico is expanding. It's growing very rapidly, because the more we are successful in refraining the drug to cross the border, the more drug is promoted and sold within Mexico, which is really, really affecting severely our youth. Today in Mexico, even in rural communities, there is drug consumption, and it's because of this problem that is a joint responsibility. So we have to work on it together, United States, Mexico, and the countries on the south. But as long as we have guerrillas, dictators like Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, we're not going to be able to solve the problem, because it's to his best interest to keep the drug flowing into the US market. One question I ask myself all the time: once the drug crosses the border, who takes it? To the Chicago market, to the Seattle market, to Santa Barbara, and to all places in the United States. So there are cartels here, so there are crime here, so there is distribution of drugs, illegal distribution of drugs, there is illegal consumption of drugs in this nation. And up to now, the only president that I have heard to say that he assumes full responsibility in cutting the supply of drugs to Mexican youth, but also cutting the supply of drugs to US youth, is Presidente Calderón in Mexico. And he's using all the power of the state in trying to accomplish that goal. And this has provoked that war. Other nations have the same position to administrate the problem, but not to eradicate. And maybe we're asking and requesting too much from authorities, from government, from the state, to stop the supply of drugs. Maybe we should think, and we should be convinced, that it's much more of a citizen's problem, it's much more of a problem at home, and the responsibility of us, the parents, or the responsibility of that young person that consumes drugs. So the answer might be much more on the society side than demanding government to protect our kids by cutting off the supply of drugs. It's time to consider and debate opening, legalizing the consumption of drugs. Because at the very end, we have to separate what is violence and crime associated to drug consumption and what is a public health problem, which is consuming drugs. And when you separate, then becomes more manageable the problem. This was done with alcohol here in the States back in the old days in Chicago. Nobody could control violence. It became very, very complicated and conflictive. And at the very end, the solution was to legalize, to authorize consumption of alcohol and let the responsibility of consuming or avoiding to the individual, to the citizen, or to the education system or the health system. So we have to think of that now in Mexico, because the cost we're paying in trying to protect US youth for access to drugs, or our own youth, we're paying a big price on the economy. Foreign investment reduction is impressive. The decrease in tourism flows to Mexico is impressive, and many other high impacts that this issue is having for our nation. The call right now is to work together. And working together doesn't mean here's 300 grand, here's 300 million for you Mexicans and take care of the problem, which is what has been done. That's not responsible enough. This nation has to work hard on reducing consumption. This nation has to work hard on reducing access to weapons, ammunition, pistols, guns, and all that equipment that cartels buy here in the States. And we have to assume a joint responsibility in solving this problem.
President Fox, as you've explained today, living in a globalized world, what goes on abroad has ramifications for the citizens of the United States and Mexico. In light of your experience, what is the global responsibility of the United States to help countries in need, and how does that compare to the global responsibility of Mexico?
Well, this nation has assumed leadership and responsibility worldwide, has assumed the commitment of extending democracy and freedom to other latitudes in the world. But maybe it has gone too far, because this nation, as well as others like Mexico, we decided back in the 50s of the last century, right after the war, to create those so-called Bretton Woods institutions through which the United Nations was created with the purpose of having a supra-institution or supra-body to assume the responsibility of keeping peace everywhere in the world, of bringing in harmony and relations among nations. So we decided to discharge the individual responsibilities of nations like United States and put it in hands of the United Nations. So we moved from unilateralism to multilateralism by all of us together assuming that responsibility through the United Nations. Very unfortunately, United Nations has not fully complied with this charter. And then this nation decides that, according to the responsibility not assumed by the United Nations, that you would bypass that and intervene directly in many different nations. And that has caused a lot of conflicts and problems to the United States as well as to the rest of the world. And that has caused this nation to lose leadership, to lose moral authority, because intervening everywhere is not the way to solve those problems. So we have to come back to reinventing those institutions, the United Nations, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, which are not working. We must reinvent them, re-engineer them, and have them to do what they have to do. United States should have presence all over the world, but more on a compassionate side, on a partnership side with the rest of the world. And that capacity this nation has. And that's the capacity that has to be implemented. Believe me, we missed the leadership of this nation worldwide. And there's a lot of discussions going, how can this nation recuperate its leadership and recuperate its moral and democratic authority worldwide. And new solutions have to come, and new actions have to be taken. By now, we almost have forgotten those very strong, moving, driving ideas like the Marshall Plan. Just imagine, I mean, just one single idea and one single plan changed the fate and the future of those 500 million that compose the European Union. And today, that bloc of nations is one of the highest per capita incomes. By far is the best distribution of income among their population, and they have a very strong, solid system based on solidarity, because all nations around want to join the European Union. Why? Because they see what happened. Spain had a per capita income lower than Mexico just 30 years ago. Today, Spain is 3 times the per capita income of Mexico. And that came through because of the union, by working all together. Portugal, Greece, Ireland, teeny small Ireland moved from 3,500 per capita income to be today the highest per capita income in the Union, in the European Union. It's over 40,000 US dollars per capita income in Ireland. It's larger than US per capita income. And that happened, that miracle happened in 30 years. How? Solidarity. They decided that each nation should contribute to the union with 2% of its gross product that they turn to the union every year. That amounts to over 100,000 billion euros. An euro is worth 1.5 times a US dollar. So it's 150 billion US dollars, that contribution, managed by the union. And what they do with that money, they bring it and they invest it on underdeveloped regions, underdeveloped nations, underdeveloped communities. So that has been the nourishing of the dynamism that helped Spain to move Greece. I proposed this to Governor Bush when I was governor in the state of Guanajuato. And he says, Fox, let's talk about baseball. I mean, be real, he tells me. I mean, how can I convince my Congress here in Texas to invest money in Mexico, to put 2% of our gross product of Texas to be invested in Mexico? And I said, no, you're not going to invest it in Mexico. You're going to invest it in poor regions, poor families. And you have that here in Texas. So part of the money is going to be invested here in Texas. He said, well, no, I don't think I can convince them. Well, I can convince my Congress in Guanajuato to put 2% of our gross product to be invested wherever there's poverty, wherever is needed for development. But no way. Later on, we found our paths together again, him as President of the United States and me as President of Mexico. So in that conversation in Rancho San Cristobal, I told them again, George, let's be wise. Don't spend the money building walls. Don't spend the money bringing in police guards and federal guards and supervising the border. Let's invest that money productively. Let's invest it in education. Let's invest it in human resources. Let's invest it in creating jobs. Fox, I told you. I told you. I told you. There's no way I can convince Congress. I couldn't do it in Texas, I cannot do it here. He said, but look at what has happened with the European Union. I mean, solidarity, compassion are very strong ingredients for development. And here's a comparison between Machiavelli and San Ignacio de Loyola, the Jesuit. Machiavelli says that you gain respect by imposing fear. So you have to be very strong so people fear you and then they respect you. The saint says you gain respect by sharing love and compassion. That's the way you gain respect. And you do things and you move mountains like this college does on its philosophy. Too long of an answer, no?
I actually think that was the perfect way to conclude this conversation. I want to thank our panelists for their thoughtful questions. And I especially want to thank President Fox for being with us today. You have reminded us of the importance of building bridges, that we are all connected. And at the breakfast this morning, he said, we are all leaders, all of us, all of you. And the challenge is to commit to a heroic goal. So today, following in the example of President Fox, I want you to think, what will your heroic goal be? What has he inspired you to do, to be a man or a woman for others, to share that love and to share your promise? Thank you for being here, and again, thank you, President Fox.